2010 was a very unusual year for spills. I mean, some very significant spills. We had the Deepwater Horizon spill in the Gulf Coast in April. That turned out to be the largest marine spill in the history of the United States. In July, we had the Enbridge pipeline spill that occurred in Talmadge Creek just outside of Marshall, Michigan. That was a very significant spill and turned out to be the most expensive inland spill response in the history of the U.S. So a lot of dollars went into cleaning up that spill. And then in September, we had a pipeline spill in the Romeoville, Lockport, Illinois area. That one did not get as much attention because that spill was contained and the spill never reached any natural bodies of water, but still it was a substantial amount of oil. So our commission acted on that. They set up a panel session at the 2010 annual meeting in Toronto. We heard from presenters on both the Ontario Preparedness and Response programs and also heard from Mark Durno of US EPA, who talked about the U.S. federal Preparedness and Response programs and gave us a presentation on the kind of the initial cleanup of the Enbridge pipeline spill. And as a result of that, the Commission decided to form a task force. Now, you may be wondering why I included this slide that has obviously such modern graphics. And I put it in here because this was a slide that I actually found in my files that I had used in numerous presentations years ago after the Exxon Valdez incident. And for those, I'm assuming most of us are old enough to remember the Exxon Valdez incident, but for those that aren't, the Exxon Valdez was a large oil tanker that went aground on a reef outside of Prince William Sound, Alaska in March of 1989. Spilling a significant amount of oil. Estimates go up to about a little over 30 million gallons of oil. And because of the pristine environment and because of the remote location, the response was very difficult. And that incident was really a wake-up call for both the United States and Canada. There were numerous laws that were passed, most significantly nationally in the U.S., the Oil Pollution Act. But also in the Great Lakes, we passed the Critical Programs Act, which also had some spills provisions in there, which really helped us strengthen the spill response framework. But I think this is an important slide, and I want you to keep this in mind as I work through the rest of the slides here, because I think this is indicative of our societal response when it comes to oil spills and other environmental emergencies, and that is when we go through periods where things are going fine, we don't have spills, we tend not to pay attention to our programs very much, and then we all of a sudden realize that we need to pay attention to those programs when a spill occurs. Real quickly, the task force charge, we were charged with reviewing the status of state and provincial preparedness and response programs. We were charged with looking at those programs and how they relate to the federal programs, both in the U.S. and Canada, and also to look at, are those federal programs strong enough to make sure that the region is well prepared in the event of a spill. And then the task force was charged with preparing a report with recommendations on preparedness and response priorities, which is the report that was in front of you yesterday. Just real quickly, the task force had numerous conference calls beginning in July of 2011. I would say on average, probably once every other month. We spent a lot of time reviewing previous task force program summary reports and policy statement. This is not the first emergency preparedness task force that the Commission has had. I actually staffed the earlier task force, which was formed after the Exxon Valdez incident. That was actually a standing task force that was in place for almost 10 years. So that group was together. Interestingly, this was kind of like a coming home party for me, because many of those people that were managing the state and provincial preparedness and response programs way back in 1989 are still there. So it was kind of a nice opportunity for me to reconnect with them. Numerous other reports have been prepared on the Great Lakes St. Lawrence River and the state of preparedness. We reviewed those. And we prepared a program summary, which is in the back of the report. It's Appendix D, which basically the task force wanted to have a starting point similar to what Tim described with the phosphorus task force, of understanding what programs are in place before we can begin to look at some of the priorities. And then finally, we looked at, the task force decided that it needed to do subcommittee work. And you'll notice some similarities between the approach that the phosphorus task force took and this task force. This task force is actually a little bit ahead. So with regard to the phosphorus task force, I guess imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, because we approach things differently, but we did work in subgroups, and we looked at 4 priority areas: pipelines, vessels, facilities, and cold weather response. Okay, so I want to go into the findings, but I would be remiss if I didn't thank the task force for all its hard work, because these people, and I just want, for all of you that are representing agencies here, I just wanted to let you know that these people that you appointed to the task force rolled up their sleeves. They invested a lot of time. They reviewed numerous reports. They helped us edit reports, and the product that came out of this, I think, is a reflection of that work. But in addition to the task force itself, we had numerous participation and collaboration from additional individuals from both the public and private sectors from the United States and Canada, having expertise in one or more of these issue areas. And these individuals participated in numerous conference calls in early 2012 and in a workshop that we held on June 18th in conjunction with the Region 5 Regional Response Team meeting. So we brought in a lot of the experts from a lot of the different federal agencies on both sides of the border, as well as additional state and provincial people to really help us shape this report. Just real quickly on report findings, and you can read these, I'm not going to go through all of them. But in, as a point of good news, the region seems well prepared overall. When OPA was passed in 1990, OPA being the Oil Pollution Act, the national emphasis really shifted to spill prevention. OPA specified new spill prevention efforts and requirements such as facility response plans, vessel response plans, mandated exercise programs for industry and agencies, and the result has been a significant reduction in the number and volume of spills. And a similar emphasis on prevention has occurred in Canada with numerous laws in place, including the Transportation of Dangerous Goods Act, the Canadian Environmental Protection Act, the Fisheries Act, the Canada Water Act, the Canada Shipping Act, which all provide a foundation for numerous important national and regional plans that have been developed to protect Canada's land, water, and wildlife resources. The relationships between jurisdictions and the federal government and agencies or industries are good and well established. We were able to help establish those relationships back in the 90s with a cooperative effort that we did with the Council of Great Lakes Governors and the major oil companies in the region, and that has continued to bear fruit because those oil company representatives continue to show up to our RT meetings and are very well connected within the region. One thing to note, as you might suspect, we spent a lot of time talking about pipelines. And one area where relationships do need to be strengthened is between the agencies regulating the pipelines, and that would be the National Energy Board in Canada and the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration of DOT on the U.S. side. Those relationships need to be strengthened with the agencies that are the primary response agencies, which would be on the U.S. side, U.S. EPA and the Coast Guard, and on the Canadian side, the provincial government that works through the regional emergency environmental teams, the REITs. There's a joint marine and joint inland contingency plan under what used to be Annex 9 of the Water Quality Agreement. We've been told by Cam Davis that annex is still going to be in place in some fashion in the new agreement. We haven't seen it. The annexes to those plans, Can-U-Slack and Can-U-Sent. Can-U-Slack is the Lakes Plan, Can-U-Sent is the Central Region Plan between the U.S. and Canada, provide the framework for joint planning, preparedness, and response, and they support the national, regional, state, and provincial plans of both countries. So it's really advantageous for us to be part of this region because the Great Lakes is really ahead of much of the rest of the U.S. and Canada in terms of those relationships.